Hello and welcome to rePRO Film Festival by Mama.film. I'm Leila Meadow-Connor.
I'm Mallory Martin.
And I'm Debbie Samples.
As the founders of rePRO, we thank you for joining us for these call to action conversations. We want to thank the village of people who have made this festival possible, our filmmakers, special guests, partners, sponsors, and of course you, our audience. You've let your time, talents, and expertise to help amplify the voices that are so crucial in the fight for reproductive justice and bodily autonomy.
When you purchase tickets and donate to rePRO, you become an active participant in change, as all net ticket sales and accompanying donations support our 5 beneficiary organizations. We thank you for participating in these vitally important call to action conversations and hope you leave feeling empowered to be your own advocate in the world.
Please keep women's reproductive rights at the forefront of your mind as we enter this critical election season.
We're pleased to present the Believe Me It's My Body call to action conversation, moderated by Kineta Sealey with Black Women's Health Imperative.
Welcome and thanks for joining the rePRO Film Festival. Believe Me, It's My Body Call to Action Conversation. My name is Kineta Sealey and I'll be serving as your moderator today. I would like to thank the founder of mama.film and rePRO Film Festival, Leila Meadow-Connor, and other rePRO Film Festival founders, Mallory Martin and Debbie Samples, for inviting me to participate in this fantastic and important film festival, as well as the rest of the rePRO team. I'd also like to thank the panelists here today for their art, time, expertise, and commitment to education and advocacy for women's reproductive healthcare issues. This Believe Me, It's My Body call to action conversation is to empower women to demand adequate services from their healthcare providers. I'd like to introduce our special guests, Alice Seabright, the director of the short film Endo, Elaine Gracie, writer of the short film Endo, and Melissa Boudreau, patient advocate and director of marketing and outreach for the Endometriosis Foundation of America. First, I would like to say that Tightly Wound, Endo, and Birth Control, Your Own Adventure are 3 very, very impactful, educational, and thought-provoking films. Since today's panelists encompass the director and writer of Endo and a representative of the Endometriosis Foundation of America, today's discussion will primarily focus on endometriosis. So to begin the conversation, I thought it might be important for the audience to understand this disease. Melissa, could you give us a broad overview of endometriosis? It is, its symptoms, prevalence, and impact?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kineta. Appreciate being on the panel today. Endometriosis affects 1 in 10 individuals, mostly assigned female at birth. And it's where tissue that's similar to the tissue that's inside the uterus grows outside of the uterus. And the way that I like to describe it for people who don't know, it's almost like a spider web. So there's lesions, but then this like spider web tissue material can bind some of your organs together, and it's very, very painful condition. So typically for myself personally as a patient, it started with very painful cramps at a young age. And then as I got older, it started to progress. And outside of my period, I would have very painful bowel movements, painful, I had a hard time eating, nausea. So it really started to spread to more of a full body disease for me as the years went on. And it took me about 10 years to get diagnosed. So that's one of the other issues as well, is there's just a very large lack of awareness with this disease. And so I was told that painful cramps were normal from a young age. And my grandmother even told me that, but my doctor told me that too. So I just thought that I had to live with that extreme pain. You know, I remember being at school and in the nurse's office, like rocking back and forth, sweating, almost vomiting. And I was told that that was normal. So that's one of the big issues with this disease, is the lack of education and awareness, because that's not normal.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to go through that and experience that. Is there a cure?
There is not a cure for endometriosis, no. So right now, the only gold standard treatment for endometriosis is excision surgery, and that is not a cure. And a hysterectomy is not a cure as well, which is a myth.
Absolutely. And what could it also lead to? Is it infertility, the impact of endometriosis?
Yes, infertility. You know, there are patients who are asymptomatic and they don't figure out that they have the disease until they're trying to get pregnant. So infertility is definitely something that's very prevalent with this disease as well, in addition to pain.
And this is why it's silence. You really wouldn't know that you have it because you don't present with any symptom, present outwardly at least, have the normal appearance, but very debilitating disease. And again, I'm sorry that you have to suffer with this. And I'm glad that we're here to talk today about endometriosis and learn. Alice and Elaine, both of you are accomplished directors and writers. How did you get started and what interested you and brought you to create this film about endometriosis? Do you have a familial or personal connection to the disease?
I'll start with that. Yes, and also thank you so much for having us here. It's wonderful that people are interested and engaging, and particularly with our film. Yes, I have endometriosis, and the film is essentially the story of two sisters, which is quite autobiographical for me because my sister was diagnosed. I mean, it took, in the same way that Melissa's story really rings true, it took a long time for my sister to be diagnosed, but she was suffering in a way that, I mean, even as a child, because I'm quite a bit younger than her, even as a child, I could see that that wasn't right. There was something quite wrong about it. And yet we were just told, it's just, come on, everyone gets it. This is how it is. I think it's incredible to me, as someone who goes through that pain, that women would not realize that they had something wrong until they were trying for a baby. I think that's incredible. So I have this family history of it. I had a horrendous GP appointment in the UK, and came home and, like a really artsy wanker, wrote a short film about it. And then I had Alice and I, Alice is an incredible creative force, and I had really wanted to work with her, so I sent her the script and we started talking about it. So.
Yeah, and so I don't personally have experience myself with endometriosis, but Elaine and I have been friends for a while. Even before we'd worked together, we'd been trying to find something to work together on for a while. So I'd heard about her experiences just as a friend, and then she sent me the script for the short film, and for me, I thought it was just a brilliant piece of writing, for lots of reasons. It deals with the subject in an incredibly raw and honest way, whilst managing to be funny, because I think that's, it's a way that a lot of people, certainly I do, and certainly Elaine does, deal with difficult issues sometimes, is that it's easier to kind of talk about it or to look at it when you're able to use humor. And then I also, definitely what the whole team wanted to do, the producers, Elaine and myself, was to make something that was a piece of entertainment and that was, that people would watch and engage with as a story, but also for us it was incredibly important to raise awareness and just give people who don't have an understanding of the disease more of an insight into what it was like to suffer with it.
Mm.
Yes. This shorts program examines the antiquated status quo for women's reproductive health care issues, including vaginismus, endometriosis, and birth control side effects. So as a woman, or just from a human perspective, I really do understand the frustration from possibly not being able to receive a timely or accurate diagnosis, or being possibly encountered by medical professionals who may inadvertently make you feel small or propose solutions that are inadequate and don't really address the issue. I've certainly had that personal experience myself. Melissa and Elaine, from your personal experiences, can you both comment on the challenges or misbeliefs or what you really want people to know about endometriosis from your personal perspectives and your challenges?
Yeah, I would say that, it's not just something that happens the first day of your period. I think it's a common misconception because people who do have maybe slight cramps, they get it their first or second day of their period. For me, this is a full body disease. I had a almost full bowel obstruction from the disease, and that could have killed me. And I don't think people understand the full day-to-day wear and tear that this disease does for your body. I think there's just a huge misconception from that, even from like friends and family. You know, I feel like they almost want to like just pat me on the back and be like, oh, you have bad periods. But it's not just bad period. You can get it in other locations than just your reproductive area. So I think that people really need to know this is serious. This is a health crisis, in my opinion, and there needs to be more awareness. And I'm obviously, you can tell I'm very, very passionate about it, but I've suffered for a really long time, and I don't want anyone else to suffer as long as I have, which is why I do what I do.
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to think of what specifically I would like. Well, part of what we try to achieve with the film, I guess, Alice kind of touched on it a bit, was to try and make it accessible, because there's still so much shame around talking about anything to do with menstrual health, you know, for such a long time. You know, again, you know, the idea of tampons and commercials in general using like antifreeze as opposed to blood, just bizarre. It's just insane. But it perpetuates this idea that it's, you know, that it's a kind of a mysterious, dirty thing. And so I guess with the film, we were trying to find a way for people to understand it, yes, on an emotional level, but also on a humorous level, so that they can show it to people, so that they can discuss it, so that they can talk about it, because we're never going to get anywhere. I mean, it blows my mind that I still turn up to doctors and they only have some kind of general sense of what it is, or even just general gynecological health. Like, my uterus and my vagina are not new in any sense. As far as I'm aware, women have always had them. So how is it possible that this is something that you couldn't have even the slightest understanding of? Like, it doesn't make any sense. These are clever people. So, but I do genuinely feel like part of that is that we start a conversation, that we just make it okay to talk about these things. And I know that there's been a push in Britain for menstrual health to be discussed in schools, which I definitely think is where it should start. I'm not sure that it should be a situation where the boys leave the room and then the women are, you know, the girls are told, you know, you'll be able to track it, it'll be fine, here's a thing you put inside yourself, all the best. You know, that's madness. So yeah, it's totally individual to you, but you'll never really know that if you're a sufferer unless you can talk to people about it. So yeah, I would like people to be able to discuss it, and if the film helps in any way at all, then that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. Education is the key, and getting awareness and increasing awareness is definitely something that we have to do. We have to do it for women. Alice, all these shorts, you seem to use humor as a coping mechanism. Can you tell me a little bit more about this and why it's important to have this approach in your film? And if Melissa and Elaine have any thoughts about that, please chime in as well. I mean, I keep thinking of this saying, and I don't know if you heard of it, you know, you got to laugh to keep from crying. I don't know if I want to, you know, boil it down to that, but I found these films to be particularly, you know, humorous, and it's relatable. Like, I could relate to a lot of things, certainly not the pain aspects or the aspects of the disease, but certainly situations, and it was just funny. So could you please tell me a little bit more about this?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think definitely you've got to laugh, because otherwise you cry is a huge part of it. And I think generally difficult situations, I think, for me anyway, I do a lot of stuff that uses humor. And for me, the definition of humor is that it's something that we use to look at and discuss and talk about things that we find scary or painful or difficult. You know, it's also in Elaine's writing, that's Elaine's personality, as you might be able to tell, is that, you know, and we talk like that as well amongst ourselves, you know, just kind of stuff that's tough. You've got to find a way to laugh through it. And so I think that's really part of the truth of going through a difficult experience, is that it isn't, you know, is that it involves humor, not to negate that experience, but precisely because it's so tough, you need to be able to laugh about it. And then on the other side, I think there's something as well in terms of how you connect to an audience, I think, which is quite interesting, where humor slightly tricks the audience into, you know, if you're laughing, you don't kind of go, oh, I don't want to watch that, or I don't want to relate, I don't want to connect with that because it's too tough, or it's too depressing, or it's too whatever. If it's funny, then you get in there and then they care, and then you come in and you hit them with the pain and the more the tougher stuff, and somehow they're open to it, and they're, you know, and I think it's a way of creating empathy, basically, because I think that what we want is for more people to empathize with this condition and with what it's like to actually live with it. And I think humor is a huge way of creating connection between people and creating empathy between people. And so I think that's, for me, why, you know, Elaine and I wanted to use, or just naturally felt like humor was just the way to
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there are many different ways to talk about it. I think that's just what we were able to bring to it.
Yeah, I was laughing out loud during the scene where, like, you're sitting there and eating whatever breakfast or whatever, and then running out of the house because you bled on the chair. That's real life. That happens. You know, I was cracking up, and I just thought that was great. And Alice, I really agree about the empathy part. That's such a huge part. Is like, people just might not understand what it's like to have this pain, but if you can just listen and have some empathy towards it really makes a big difference. But yeah, I was cracking up.
It was hilarious and definitely connected. Elaine, how is it to write for you? Is this a kind of is it difficult? Because it seems like this is maybe a bit autobiographical, or is it cathartic, or how do you feel about writing about endometriosis?
I mean, I really didn't want to. I didn't want to. I wanted to ignore it for as long as I physically could, which is part of my personality. Like, you know, run away from pain. But it was partly having watched my sister's life be completely destroyed by it. You know, she, not even just ostensibly her life and her day-to-day life, but her personality, her character is totally absorbed in this fucking monster that we weren't allowed to talk about. So, you know, so I really didn't want to discuss it. And I think it was only when I had started to embrace it a little bit that I began to kind of realize that this is what people go through. I think in my head I had gone, I don't have it as bad as Lindsay, my sister. I'll be fine. You know, if I ignore it, I'll be all right. Right. I'll be fine. And I'm sure that, you know, Lindsay, when she talks to me about her difficulties with doctors and diagnoses and treatment that isn't hacking you to bits or making you a drug addict, then that she's exaggerating or whatever. You know, I just repeated all these toxic messages to myself. And then when it got to the stage where I just couldn't deal with it anymore and I had to go to a doctor, I was like, oh my God, she was right. This is awful. And so I felt like in the face of it, that I couldn't. There was no way I could do anything other than do something. And like I said, being, you know, a creative person, I just like went, I'm so angry, and wrote a short film that was mad. It's a lot madder than, you know. Go on, Alice.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting in the script that you wrote as well, Elaine, is that in some ways the journey of the character is kind of the journey that you went on, which is that she's internalized a lot of these messages and has really kind of got a lot of shame, you know, around her own body and what's happening. You know, the blood on the chair is a great example. It's like this somehow it just like hits her here of like, I've done something disgusting and awful and I need to run in shame. And also just the minimizing of pain as well, as saying, well, it's nothing, you know, I can just grin and bear it, it'll be fine. You know, that's so much what the character's doing in the film. And by the end, she you know, she it's the beginning of her. We take her to the place where she can hopefully start to talk about it. And I think that's sort of what we hope the film can do as well for people watching it, is to kind of say, okay, this is the beginning of a conversation. This is the beginning of trying to undo that shame and tendency that we have to just, it's not something we can talk about. Actually, you know, let's be able to do that, and the film's a good sort of talking point for that as well. Of you know, we talked a lot. We worked with some endometriosis charities here in the UK, and some amazing people who kind of both gave us thoughts on the script, but also sort of screened it to people or whatever. And we got a lot of people say, you know, sufferers saying, you know, I showed it to my sister or my brother or you know, as a way of just saying, this is what I'm talking about, you know. And that was fantastic. Yeah.
It was terrifying. It was terrifying. See, the screening that I had in front of the endometriosis sufferers, I couldn't be there. I was in a toilet somewhere throwing up, because I thought, if I need them to love it. I need them to feel like it represents them. And luckily we were fine, but whew, that was tough. So no, I didn't really set out to write it, but I felt compelled to, just because I was like, someone has to start talking about this. Part of it was also that the idea that I should be okay with not having sex. That was a big thing with the doctor as well. I was like, what do you mean? Would you be okay with it? You probably wouldn't, you know. You know?
Remember that scene? Yes, that was interesting. The solutions that he proposed was, okay, that's not sex. Okay.
And that's real life. Like those conversations are still happening. It's 2020 right now. It's
incredible. It's incredible. I mean, would a man be okay with cupping? I don't even really know what cupping is. I don't even know what it is. But would you be okay with it? Meet someone you really like, but cup them? No, absolutely not. So no, yeah. So it's this, and I continue to run into this. And Melissa will either agree or disagree, but I'm sure she's had a similar experience, where there's an expectation that you should just be happy if you're not in pain. You should just be happy that you're not in pain. Don't expect to live a full, a full sensory life. Don't expect that, because you're a woman. So really, sex for you is anyway, right? You mean, who knows? Yeah. So, I mean, they don't know if we're having a good time, apparently. You know, so who knows? So you'll be fine. You'll be all right. You should just be all right. You should just be okay that you're not in pain. Here you are, here's the door. And you bring that up to someone, you say, no, that's not good enough for me. I want to have a sex life. I want to be able to have sex with my partner without it being excruciating, without him feeling like he's doing me some horrific damage, you know, like I want that, please. And you know, it's just not,
yeah, Elaine, you bring up so many good points. I think one is denial, and I don't know if it's because of the way that we've been treated for so many years by doctors, but I denied it too. At my first job years ago, when I had one of my surgeries, I told everyone I had back surgery because I was too embarrassed to be like I had endometriosis surgery. And until I started talking out about it, only several years ago, after 20 years of suffering, because I was also in denial, embarrassed, hide my pain all the time. And I do think that stems from us not being taken seriously for so many years. You know, and I had my first doctor was a female doctor, and I came to her and said, I think I have this disease called endometriosis. And she didn't take me seriously. So it's just, there's just such a systematic issue with this disease, and maybe women's health in general. But from my personal experience, I know for endo, it's unfortunately still not taken very seriously.
Yes, I can only imagine if this disease affected men, what it would look like, because we certainly live in a sexist society, which puts women's needs secondary. We have this shame. So there's a lot of barriers, a lot of factors. I mean, 7 to 10 years to get this diagnosed. I cannot even imagine the pain and the suffering that you've had to endure for all of this time. And then to have it, you know, affect you during your reproductive years. And, you know, my sister-in-law suffers from endometriosis, and it took her about approximately that length of time. And she was always, the doctors, medical professionals just disregarded her complaints. They, you know, said, hey, that's okay, you'll grow out of it. They ignored her. And it wasn't until She had other symptoms that she passed out. So it became apparent, but it was much, much later on in life. So yes, I can only imagine. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected people's lives physically and mentally, their health, their finances, and really just how we live our daily lives day to day worldwide. How has COVID-19 affected being treated for or being seen for endometriosis complications during this time? And what do you think will be the outcome or effect of that? What should women do? And that's open to anyone who wants to take that question.
Want me to take it first? Okay, so I think, obviously a lot of surgeries have been postponed, and since that's really the only way to get diagnosis and gold standard treatment right now, it's a lot of difficulty. People are having a lot of pain, and I'm sure the extended stress of just dealing with a pandemic for everyone, but then having a chronic illness, depression, anxiety, I'm sure is heightened at this time for people who are suffering from this chronic illness. But, personally, what I've really done, and I think could help people who are suffering from endo, is I've really started to we're stuck at home. So like I've taken the time to relax more, do more self-care, take baths with Epsom salt, meditate 20 minutes a day, like force myself to do these things that I've always kind of wanted to do, but was too busy to do all the time, and really start to take care of myself. Now, is that going to make the disease go away or cure it or anything? No, but at least relaxing myself and relaxing my body will help a little bit. And if you can access, personally, again, for me, acupuncture has been very helpful. It's very expensive, but I am able to get there once a month. So that's something that's helped me too, and just gentle stretching and just trusting that everything's going to be okay and that you will be able to get the treatment that you need. It's just, it might be a little bit delayed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the UK, we've been quite heavily locked down, and then things have started to ease up. But I mean, I think it's kind of been a double-edged sword for me, because I find endometriosis quite isolating anyway. I find anyone, I think, living with a chronic pain condition isolates themselves, especially if you're Scottish and you don't really want to share your emotions anyway, which is kind of a trait of ours. I'm deeply uncomfortable with walking in. Well, I just would never do it. I don't even know why I'm saying deeply uncomfortable. I would never walk into a room and then meet someone and say, yes, I'm in a lot of pain today. So I would just never do it, So I tend to isolate myself, and I think it's been made worse by not being able to be around, because being around someone like Alice, who's a good friend of mine, just being around people helps. I find it quite soothing. It's bizarre. I'm not entirely sure what the connection is with pain and and various different techniques, but I definitely find being around people helps me, and so that has been quite tricky. But on the other side of that, I did a couple of years ago, I couldn't accept that I was going to go down the same treatment path as my sister. I couldn't accept the level of pain medication. I couldn't accept these invasive surgeries. I couldn't accept it. So I did a bit of research, and I went to a dietitian a couple of years ago, and she said, you need to try this, you need to try this, you need to try that. And I was a bit like, onions really affect my pain? I'm not sure they do, but I gave it a go, and actually I managed to work out triggers, dietary triggers. And so so it has given me more time, as Melissa was saying, to kind of calm down and to have less stress and to be really rigid in my diet, and so that has helped some. It's just so tricky. It's just so tricky if you're in pain in general. Squeaky wheels get noise, but squeaky wheels get attention. But I just don't know that we are used to talking about our pain, because we're not used to it being taken seriously. And so you also don't want to be that person. You don't want to be the person that at the end of the week is still in the same pain that they were at the start of the week, and you don't want to be that. So it's hard. It's difficult. Isolation is difficult. I think it compounds things a bit. So yeah.
There's a lot of guilt with this disease. I don't know, Elaine, if you feel that too.
Yeah.
Constant guilt.
Yeah, because you feel like just, I don't know. It's tough because I think in a way, part of the problem right at the beginning, and you touched on it a bit, Melissa, is that, women in general, for the most part, have periods and have period pain. This is not period pain. I cannot stress enough. It's not. It's someone, it's someone kicking the shit out of my liver for however long. It's not the kind of thing where take a cup of paracetamol and lie down for a bit. It's not that. So there is a lot of guilt. I don't always, I don't know, but I wonder how much I put that on myself. I think that was part of what the film was about for me, was the things that I have, the ideas that I have absorbed, and then that I'm continually telling myself about endometriosis, about having a gynecological problem, and humor was a way to kind of undercut that. So, because it's easier. If I can tell a joke about it, if I can make a joke about onions, then I'm probably going to be all right telling you some other stuff about me, how long I've been in, stirrups with some guy looking at my junk. I'm probably going to be better telling you about that than I am just going, oh my God, it's so awful. Oh God, it's so awful. And hopefully that would mean that other women might be okay talking about it,
Yeah.
So I've totally gone off the topic of COVID.
No, but I think that relates to what you were saying earlier, Melissa, with that the first person who didn't take it seriously was a woman, which is to say that we've all taken on those messages. It's not like it's a systemic problem, and it's they're messages that are so deeply ingrained that you take in from the first time, even like the first time you get your period, and it's like you don't, it's like come into this other room and here's a tampon and don't mention it, and like all of that. That's the sort of is spectrum that then goes all the way to the fact that the two of you can be in such intense pain and still feel like somehow if you bring it up or mention it that it's on you, and it's it's crazy, and it's that there is just such strong messaging and such strong things that we all take on board, and lots of female doctors are part of the problem as well.
Yeah, COVID-19 has also illuminated and magnified the health disparities and inequalities that communities of color face, especially African American women. In terms of endometriosis, Black women face a number of factors that make a diagnosis and or treatment more difficult. Black women are often less likely to get their endometriosis diagnosed, or they have to wait longer times for a proper diagnosis. Racial and implicit bias leads to a belief of some doctors that Black women are less sensitive to pain. It can be disguised and overlap with other conditions and diseases that are prevalent among Black women. And, and sometimes in the community, they don't have the access to resources like you mentioned, Melissa, the acupuncture or the holistic treatments that you both mentioned, Elaine, you mentioned it as well, that could really provide some help. So knowing this, you guys, knowing the disparities and how endometriosis is really under-researched and often misdiagnosed for years and years, and as we cited, 7 to 10 years approximately, and possibly even longer to get a diagnosis for women of color, how can all patients become empowered about their own health needs, and what can be done so that every woman is heard?
I think, one of the biggest things is a lot of women don't want to do this, because they don't feel comfortable, but you have to advocate for yourself. And I know there's a lot of frustration with that because you shouldn't have to. And I agree with that. But I go in with my binder of medical records, with a notebook of every pain that I've had every single day. And it's almost like you have to go in fighting. And if that doctor isn't trusting you or believing you or listening to you or being empathetic, walk out. Like, we have to force, it shouldn't be this way, but at this point, like, we have to force getting the correct care. And if someone isn't giving it to you, then goodbye, thank you, next. Like, that's kind of where I'm at with it now. In the beginning, I would listen and I would trust, and that just doesn't work because then I'm not being listened to, and it's wrong. So I know it's very difficult, especially if you're very sick and you're in pain, but everything that you can document, every piece of paper you can bring in, and if they're not listening, then walk out. That's where I'm at, like, just done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they should know. You should know. Your job. How many women do you see in a day? A lot, because there's a lot of us. There's no way that you're not coming across gynecological issues regularly. And, you know, and I understand it's tricky because, I guess, as Alice was saying, in terms of the journey of the character in the film, part of what I've had to come to terms with is the fact that I would, you know, previously see doctors, and I would dance around it. And if there was any possibility it could be my appendix, which it never was, then I would be like, yay, it's my appendix. Which, yeah. So, you know, it's really tough because you're so vulnerable, you know, so hard to go into someone who has authority and that you're looking for help from, to be vulnerable and strong. It's kind of sucky. Like, why do I, you know, top of everything else, I have to be this? But yeah, I think you have to get to a stage where it's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable. My GP doesn't have to know everything about it. They should know kind of what it is, but if they don't have to know everything about it, but if they don't, refer me to someone, you know, let me help me. That's what I'm here because let me tell you, you know, women, my experience is that women will not go to the doctor about their vagina unless they are seriously worried. Like, there's, you know, because right from the start, you know, depending on if you get a nurse, you know, the moment they bring out a speculum, it's just like, no, you know. So if you're going to someone, it's because you're in a real place of vulnerability and pain and stress and concern. And you, as Melissa said, you shouldn't have to, but you kind of have to dig deep. And if someone is not going to listen to you when you're telling them that you are in more pain than you could ever believe possible, you have to find someone else. You have to, because it will keep going. It won't stop. That's another part of the film. Like, it's not going to leave you alone. It's not something that you can wish away. So you have to find someone to listen to you, and you will do. There are great people out there. It just sometimes takes some time, and you have to be brave enough to be really honest with yourself and with them. So yeah, talk, have conversations.
And I think one really tactical thing to do is find an organization that can maybe help you, or a friend or someone else who has endometriosis, because you may not have the energy to be able to advocate for yourself. And that's one great thing about the internet, right? Like, Facebook didn't exist when I first started going through all of this. Now you can, there's groups that will help you advocate for yourself all over the internet. And if you don't have the energy to do it, which I completely understand, find someone to help you through the process. And there's a lot of different organizations all over the world.
Yes, absolutely. How do we support, and possibly most of this dovetails into what you were saying, but how do we support loved ones living with endometriosis? So certainly you can, as you mentioned, go online and find support groups and find other people to help bolster your loved ones that are living with endometriosis. Any other thoughts in regard to that? And open the floor to everyone.
Empathy and listening, I think, is really big. And I'll give one example on where I feel like the film Endo, you know, the more people you could show even films like this powerful film to people who don't have the disease, they may understand it more. And one example that, you know, another film that's in this film festival, Endo What, I did a film premiere of that in Detroit 4 years ago. And I had one of my best friends there who in years past said to me, "You're always sick," like, because I didn't want to go out one night or something. And that was very hurtful to me as a very, very close friend. I was very hurt, but she didn't understand. I couldn't explain it. She came to that film premiere, and when she walked out of the film, she was crying and apologized to me. So sometimes it's really shouldn't be this way, but it's hard for people to understand it when they're really close to you. But if you show them a powerful film like Endo What or Endo or something like that, and you're removing yourself personally from the situation, it may really help them understand better. That's why, you know, I'm so appreciative of the film that you ladies have made and this film festival, because it will make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. It's just so difficult. It's so hard. I don't want to be defined by it, but it's here and there's nothing I can do about it. And it does impact my life. So I think if you create a general environment where with your friends and your girlfriends or your partner or whatever, where you can just talk about these things, I think that's great, because I'm not going to always want to talk about it. And, you know, and sometimes I am just going to feel a bit gross, which is difficult because, you know, you want women to feel empowered and you don't want them to feel shame. But then the truth is sometimes it just does make you feel awful and icky and all those things. And I think it's important to be really super honest about that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm blessed with such a wonderful friendship group that in a way I don't really feel the need to talk about it too much, because I know I could if I wanted to, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I think conversations, these kinds of conversations should be had. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. And then eventually if I have daughters or sons, I will make sure that it's okay that they grow up in an environment where it's fine for it to be talked about, you know, any kind of problems, any kind of issues in that area, you know, and then we'll kind of be starting from a level playing field, I feel like, because it won't be such a trudge to get help. You won't feel like on top of this condition you have to then fight to get any kind of support. So yeah, I think just discussion, open and honest discussion would be good in general.
I wonder, as you know, as Elaine's friend, and you know, just in terms of being a friend to someone with endo, I think possibly something maybe I'm guilty of, and I think, but it would be interesting to hear what the two of you think. Is, you know, it's one thing being able to talk about it when you want, but maybe it's also the job of friends, and I'm definitely guilty of not doing this enough, of checking in and sort of I don't know, how do you feel about that? Do you like it if it's brought up, or do you feel actually I'll talk about it if I want to, but you know?
Elaine, what do you think? Sometimes people ask me, how are you? And I just say, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always lovely to someone ask.
Yeah.
Honestly. Especially if people know, you know, I don't know. Again, this guilt thing comes in. Melissa, you're gonna have to shout at me. I feel guilt. I don't want people to feel like it's their burden too. Do you know what I mean? So I don't want people to feel like they need to, you know, mark on the calendar, have I checked Elaine's uterus today? You know, how's it going? You know, I don't want to feel like people have to do that. But at the same time, even if I don't want to talk about it, it is really nice now and again for people to be like, how is it?
You know, one way I really like is like, or just being like thinking of you, or hope you're feeling well, instead of like that I feel like is very, very nice, just to send love. And then if I want to talk about it, then I'll reach out and be like, you know, I'm really having a tough day. Things are really tough. I don't know. It's so difficult because I never want to be treated differently.
Yeah.
You know, you feel that too. Like, I just want to be treated the same as everybody else. And sometimes I feel like if people think you have this chronic illness, they kind of tiptoe around you. I don't you know, like,
yeah,
it's hard.
No,
it's hard
don't do that. That's dreadful. Don't ever tiptoe around me ever. No. No, I think anything. Yeah, you're right. Anything. Because then Alice has experienced this with me one time where I had an appointment and then I was going to hers for dinner, and the appointment was quite bad. It was a fertility type appointment, and I was like crying in the office, and then I was crying when I left, and I was really late for dinner, and I was like, I could lie about this. I could say I got hit by a bus, or I could say something else happened. Then I actually went, and this was with the producer as well, Alex Blue, one of the producers of Endo. And basically Alice made dinner And Alex and me, we all sat in the kitchen, and I just cried for the entire evening. I just cried for the entire
And we just poured you wine.
I just kept feeding me alcohol.
It's fine, keep crying.
You know, and it was so great. They were just like, I'm going to get upset. They were like, are you afraid you're going to be in pain? And I said, yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to be in pain for the rest of my life. And yeah, and so that was, and I did it. But I went and I cried like the best of them for the whole evening. And then we played some games and it was great. But yeah, I think it's really important to just be honest with people if you can. I know it's so hard. Oh, I've really gone.
It's okay. We're here for you, Elaine.
I know you're gonna get me going. I'm like, oh gosh. It's okay though.
It's okay. It's okay. It's real.
Yeah. But I did, and that was great. In a way, that was like, it was so wonderful, because then I knew after that, I was like, if I needed to, it's almost like the worst thing that can happen to someone like me, because I'm so like aggressively jolly, that like that experience with them was brilliant, because it was the worst it could have been. And I did it anyway. I went anyway. I was honest about it. And they were fine. They were like, yeah, just cry. Don't worry about it. And so that really allayed a lot of my fears about being like that person, the person that people avoid because she's this, being defined by it, or as Melissa said, being treated differently. So, yeah.
Thank you for that question, Alice. I appreciate that question, though. It's a good question.
Yeah, massively.
It's good to know. Thank you for sharing.
Yes. So how, in terms of going back and discussing how to be your own advocate, what are some of the signs and symptoms that you might be looking for so that each woman can recognize that they might actually have endometriosis? What would be maybe one of the hallmark features, maybe possibly the pain? What else would you say you should definitely, talk to your healthcare provider about a possible diagnosis of endometriosis if you're going through certain things?
I say, so killer cramps are not normal. So if you can't take 2 ibuprofen and go about your day, you're missing events. That is the first symptom that something is going wrong. That is not normal. And you may be told that that's normal, but it's not. So that's the first thing. And if you start missing just kind of day-to-day life, or you can't get out of bed because the pain's so bad, that would be first. And then a lot of people experience severe nausea and problems with like almost IBS type symptoms. That would be, that's like kind of step 2 is at least in my journey and what people see. I would say those are the first 2 indicators, but then as time goes on, really you could have pain in your neck, you could have pain in your shoulder, you could have pain in your back, your lower back. And you would not think that it's all correlated, but it is. But typically the very, very, very painful periods is the first indication, unless you're asymptomatic. So.
Yeah. Yeah, things like, as Melissa was saying, kind of secondary issues, For me, the big thing was when I started to lie about it. It was funny that Melissa said, that you spoke about having back surgery. Well, I've used the whole, I've used the appendix excuse multiple times, honestly. It's just as well, a lot of the time I have male bosses and they don't check because then it's like, but I can have my appendix removed 6 times and that's fine, But yeah, if you get to a stage where it's not just cramps, you're getting secondary issues from it, and you're starting to make excuses to yourself or to other people, there's something kind of not right there. And I think it would be good to get checked out, because statistically it's going to be a long old journey. Even if you go the first time you go to that doctor and you say something, they're going to find, it was part of the film as well, obsessed with my poo, absolutely obsessed with it, like desperate for it to be something with my bowels, because I feel like they know the bowels. Men have bowels too, so they would be able to find a solution to poo issues. so yeah, it's going to be a long journey. And so go, be that person, be the person that goes in and says, I'm not, I appreciate, most women have periods and most women have cramps, but something's not right here. Because then it's logged, then it's registered. And so then if you go back in a year's time, because oftentimes they're going to send you away with some nonsense and you're going to have to go back, then at least they can say, oh, well, this has been going on for 6 months. This has been going on for a year. Okay. And then you only have to wait 6 years and then you'll get a diagnosis. So yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully these conversations like this will prevent 6-year diagnosis, 7-year, 10-year in your film. Seriously. That's what we're all here to do, right?
Yes. Yes. And that just ties right into the title of this series. Believe me, it's my body. We really are, and we have to be our own advocates. I'm telling you something, it's real. So hopefully, as long as we stick to that, then we will get the attention that we deserve to get diagnosed. What are you, Alice and Elaine, what kind of, are you working on any new films right now?
Go on, Alice.
Yeah, we've a number of different projects. We are actually also early stage. Elaine's Elaine can talk about this, but she's developing a TV project, which is, on the same topic, with a sort of not based on the short film, but with a character who has endometriosis, and that's something that hopefully we might get to.
I'm working on a couple of things, but we really, I think particularly the response to the short film has been so incredible. I'm not sure we quite realized what we were getting into when we did it. We were very passionate about it, but we didn't know how it would be received. But the response has been incredible. I mean, it's been incredible. And so we wanted to try and find a way to carry on this idea. And so I'm working on hopefully turning it into a TV concept, which I think would be great. So.
Amazing.
Okay. So what can we do to advance endometriosis education, particularly within the medical community? And what organizations can we support?
So I think really this has to be something that's, first taught home early, in middle school, in high school, and then in medical school. I don't think this is, and I don't know, but I don't think this is really addressed in medical school. And if it is, I believe I heard the rumor that it's like covered for 30 minutes during OBGYN education, which is, it's insane to think about when you think of the prevalence of this disease. So I think that that's definitely a first step. And then, the Endometriosis Foundation of America has a program called Empower, where we go into schools and people can volunteer to go into schools to educate. Again, that's starting at the younger level, not in medical school. So I really think that there needs to be more programs for medical school. A lot of the programs, at least in the US, are all for more like volunteers to educate either nurses and or just go into schools and educate, which I think is phenomenal, but the medical community needs something. And I don't know the answer to how we get into the medical community. The foundation does a medical conference as well, but I think it has to be something that's actually in the curriculum.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there has been a push. We did a lot of work with a charity called Endo UK, and they're fantastic. They have a couple of members of parliament that are sufferers or advocates that are really trying to push menstrual health in schools, because I think by the time that's the time when you're learning about it in the first place, that is the time when you need to understand that there are also potentially going to be problems, and it's okay to come forward and to discuss it and to ask questions, and you're not don't feel like you're a freak, that this is I mean, it's incredible. It's 1 in 10. It's, you know, we talk like it's niche. It's not. It's not. That's another thing that came about, and I think that Alice is the same. When we started to tell people that we were making this film, the number of people that came out of the woodwork and said, "I have it. My partner has it. You've no idea what we've been through." These were people that I'd known for years and never, you know, had no inkling. So I would bloody love to cut out the section in the film where it's in the GP surgery and then it switches, you know, it switches genders, and just show that to doctors. I just love it, you know, and just show them, this is what you're saying to me. This is how this comes across. Do you understand that? Because I don't think they do. And we tried really hard in the short not to come down too hard on GPs, because they have such a difficult job. In the UK, I'm talking, you know, general practitioners have such a tough job, but at the same time, come on, peeps. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's back to it being a systemic, you know, it's not any individual GP who's a bad person at all. It's a wider problem of, yeah, it not getting taught in schools, not getting taught in medical school, and then therefore they don't have they're not equipped to deal with it properly either. And then the toxic beliefs, I think, that are there as well. But yeah, and UK, they're doing amazing things. I'm not so sure in the US, but yeah, there's a lot of amazing work happening. And I do think that, you know, even if you think, you know, between like now compared to say 4 or 5 years ago, I would say that there has been a huge, you know, change in awareness. And I think it feels like that's what we sort of need to keep pushing on, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for organizations in the US, I mean, EndoWhat, which I know, again, like I said, they have a film showing, they have a nurses initiative education. We have a school education. I believe EndoMarch also has a school education. So there's a lot of organizations in the US trying to do education. Also EndoBlack, which is new in the US, 2 years, I think. Lauren's been doing that, so she's trying to educate as well. So I think there's a lot of education going on, but for the medical community specifically, I don't know if there is. So that's where I think we need to do some work too.
Mm.
Yes. And lastly, ladies, why are you passionate about this work, whether that's writing, filmmaking, being a patient and advocate, and why will you continue to address women's reproductive health rights?
Want me to go first? Okay.
That's been the pattern, Melissa. I think
I'm just going to stay on pattern. I mean, obviously I'm passionate about it because I'm a patient, and there's just been a lot of, I hate to say it, but suffering and misinformation. And I just really want to change that for the future generations. I don't want them, like Elaine said, for this to be taboo. You know, we should be able to hand a tampon in public and not be hiding behind a closed door and do that. You know, reproductive health is not something that should be scary to talk about and should be taboo. You know, this is a real issue, and I want someone at 18 or 16, if they're in a lot of pain, to get the proper treatment then, so they don't have to suffer until they're 41 like me right now. And so that's why I'm passionate about it, because I want to prevent that from happening. And unfortunately, I still talk to some young 21, 22, 23-year-olds that are being told the same thing I was told 20 years ago, which I will keep fighting for them because that's unacceptable.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I'll go.
Go on.
I mean, I love telling stories, and I love telling stories about women. You know, I think through all of this, it's been quite a deep dive into something that made me incredibly uncomfortable. But the kind of source material was why. As Melissa said, why is it? Why do we not hand why would we sneak a tampon under the table? Why? Where does that come from? So strange, actually. When you think about it, it's so strange, because predominantly women have periods for a long stretch of their lives. Why? It makes no sense. And I think when you start to unpick it, it speaks to a larger issue, a larger problem. And it kind of refers back to this about ownership over your own body. Even though in this day and age, we feel like we have a lot of autonomy, I'm not sure that we do. And what's tricky at times is that because as Alice was saying, it's systemic, we perpetuate it. I would do that. If I was in a restaurant now, even after everything I've been through, I would probably still sneak a tampon under the table. I would probably still, for discretion's sake or whatever. And that's me. It's self-perpetuating through me, of all people. That's not right. There's something fundamentally wrong there, that women feel the need to have to do that. And I think until we get to a place where women are allowed to be dark and complicated and in pain and out of pain and in charge of what they want and who they are and what they do properly, I just think these things will continue to happen. And the kind of the hard edge of that is, as Melissa said, it's suffering. That's where you see the ramifications of sneaking a tampon under the table to someone, which doesn't seem like a very big problem, but the end product of that is a girl being in unbelievable pain for huge periods of her life, and her only options being drugged to within an inch of her life, or getting hacked to pieces every 2 years. That's not okay. That's not okay now. It was never okay, but it's not okay now. So really, I think that there's still quite a bit to be done, but it starts with us, and it starts with having these conversations. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, amazing what you've just both said. Yeah, I think for me, that's what I can bring to the table is filmmaking, and I think for me, I've always loved doing it, but I had a whole sort of thought process at one point of like, what is it about? What is the point of it? And I do think that it's this idea of, I think filmmaking, you can look at subjects that are complicated and that are difficult, and you can show points of view that haven't been shown before, and you can show people the truth of what something feels like, and create empathy. And I think for me, that's been what I've taken into filmmaking, or what I see it as, like what the process of filmmaking is for me. And it's funny, I have ended up doing quite a lot of stuff around reproduction, sex, and sort of women's bodies, actually. And I think it's probably just a weird hang up of mine, but it's also, I think, because this is crazy, and the ways in which we as women don't have a language for it really, or we're not, we've inherited a lot of ways of thinking about it, and I think it all comes back to the wider theme that we've talked about a lot today, which is autonomy over our own bodies. And I think possibly one of the reasons why I'm a bit obsessed with it, and why actually quite a lot of female filmmakers seem to be, is I think because of this sense of like regaining some autonomy by talking about it and saying, okay, what is going on with my body? What does it feel like? What do I want to do with it? What feels good? What feels bad? What and sort of regaining agency and telling those stories, I think for me has been something that I've sort of been compelled to do, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we've done that here today. Certainly our voices as women need to be heard, and they need to be communicated and to raise awareness. And we've done this today, starting with this conversation. So I just want to thank you all so very much for your openness, your vulnerability, sharing your personal stories. This has been a very educational and transformative conversation. And of course, I'd like to thank our audience for participating in this call to action conversation. For a recap of the organizations you can support around this topic, Visit day 2 on the rePRO website. Please make plans to support rePRO Film Festival by purchasing film tickets and attending more of their call to actions conversations. You can get the full info at repromamafilm.org. And don't forget, all ticket sales are donated to reproductive justice advocacy organizations. And thank you so much. Thank you again. Thank you, ladies. And thank you for
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really
Bye now.
appreciate it. Bye.